you. Well, let's get started. Religion in present-day Greece. Just like in other countries on the Balkan Peninsula, we find also in Greece many diverse religious communities and a fascinating blend of cultural traditions, such as in music, literature, cooking, customs, and trade. In the realm of a religion, however, Greece numbers only one large body, namely the Orthodox Church, whereas other groups are, from a quantitative perspective, much smaller. At present, almost all Greeks are, at least nominally, Christians, and Greece is proud of being the first European region to have been reached by missionaries who proclaimed the good news about Jesus Christ. According to the New Testament Acts of the Apostles, St. Paul preached the gospel in the Greek Macedonian cities of Philippi, Thessalonica, Veria, and then in Athens and Corinth. And Paul's letters to the young Christian communities of Thessalonica and Corinth are also important key documents in the New Testament. Because, as I just indicated, the overwhelming majority of Greeks adheres to the Orthodox Church, we will first turn our attention to this large body. Anyone who visits Greece can observe that the Orthodox Church is a key part of the Greek society. In daily life, the Church plays an important role by way of the rites of passage, for instance. Infant baptism is a great family event. As for matrimony, a separate civil marriage is possible and has also, due to the financial crisis of the past decade, even become paramount. But still a high number of couples prefer to be married in church. Furthermore, nearly all funerals take place with Orthodox ceremonies, and attendance at commemoration services for the repose of beloved relatives and friends is common. Since the Orthodox Church is convinced that cremation is not only bodily but also spiritual destructive, it has taken a very long time to introduce legislation to allow for burning the bodies of the deceased. But this is now possible, but it's a very recent development. Good Friday and Easter form the climax of the Orthodox Holy Week, known as the Great Week, indeed of the entire liturgical year. Then nearly all Greeks attend church services in which the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ are extensively reenacted and visually dramatized. For many foreigners, tourists too, these rituals, like the procession and lamentations on Good Friday, and the stately reading of the resurrection gospel on a podium outside the church during the Easter vigil, are moving events. The annual festival of the local community's patron saint, which includes music and dance, as well as pilgrimages to noted shrines, such as those of the Mother of God Mary on the island of Tinos and of Saint Nectarios on Aegina, are other highlights. Let me provide some formal data. About 95% of the population of the over 11 million inhabitants of Greece have been baptized in the Orthodox Church. The center of ecclesiastical administration is Athens, where the Archbishop of Athens presides over the Holy Synod of the Hierarchy, as it is called, the ruling body. The incumbent Archbishop is Hieronymus, who is incidentally a trained archaeologist who studied classical archaeology at our own University of Graz. The synod consists of all bishops, who number about 80. So many dioceses are very small. For practical reasons, I mean, if you have 80 bishops, it's a lot to govern the church. For practical reasons, there is a much smaller body, namely the permanent Holy Synod, which meets often, and its membership changes every year, except for the Archbishop of Athens, who is always there. The proclamation of the Greek War of Independence against the Turkish Ottoman Empire in 1821, so that is now 200 years ago, and numerous commemorative events take place in this year. This proclamation of independence has left its mark on the church, because it also resulted in the breaking off of relations between the Church of Greece and the ecumenical patriarchate of Constantinople, which was closely allied with the leadership of the Ottoman Empire. Eventually, however, the self-governing Church of Greece was recognized by Constantinople in 1850. But from an administrative point of view, by far not all of Greece, only a part belongs to the Orthodox Church of Greece. What is the matter? Several parts of the country, notably Crete, the Dodekanissos, so the 12 islands, inter alia Rhodos and Patmos, and the monastic republic of Mount Athos, continue to fall directly under the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Constantinople, which possesses its center in Istanbul. And also the northern Greek provinces of Macedonia, Thrace, and Epirus belong formally to the Patriarchate of Constantinople. But for the time being, they are part of the Church of Greece. And then, what about the about 7 million Greeks who have emigrated and who now live in North and South America, Western Europe, and Australia? These two belong to the great Church of Constantinople, not to the Orthodox Church of Greece. So the metropolis of Austria, for instance, in Vienna, is part of the Constantinople Patriarchate, not of the Orthodox Church of Greece. So much for some formal data. Let's now discuss a variety of striking characteristics of Greek Orthodoxy. I will begin with the role of religious education. At most types of public schools, Orthodox religious education is part of the curriculum, but it is no longer compulsory. It used to be for a long time, but now it is no longer. And in recent years, the number of curriculum hours has considerably been reduced. Outside school, there are special catechism hours in church institutions. And many dioceses provide also courses in Byzantine music, in iconography, also in foreign languages, even computer lessons. For candidates for the priesthood, there exist seminaries to prepare them for ordination. And those who want to study theology at an academic level can do so at the state universities of Athens and Thessalonica, and at several higher ecclesiastical academies. But it's only Orthodox theology you can study there. Another feature of Greek Orthodoxy is monasticism and the high number of convents and monasteries. There are at least twice as many nuns as monks, so twice as many women as men who opt for the monastic life. Many monasteries, in particular Mount Athos in northeastern Greece, are famous for their liturgy and asceticism. In practicing hesychasm comes from the Greek word for ησυχία, repose, quietness. This is a monastic form of meditation and mysticism. In that form of meditation and mysticism, the monks and nuns almost continuously repeat the so-called Jesus prayer, with its formula of, I quote, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me," end of quote, as a means to reach spiritual purification, illumination, and deification, theosis, that is, unity with the divine. At least in liberal circles, the Athos monks are also notorious for their warnings against modernism, ecumenism, interreligious dialogue. Interestingly, the international community of Mount Athos, so I repeat international, it's not only Greeks. The Bulgarians have a monastery, the Serbs have a monastery, the Romanians have their own location, the Russians have a famous monastery, and there are also German and American and other monks. This international community of Mount Athos in northern Greece enjoys a semi-autonomous political status in Greece, which is guaranteed by the Greek constitution. There is a Greek governor, there is Greek police, but the monastic community governs itself. This monastic peninsula can be visited only by men, and then only by men who have a specific permit. Without this specific permit, you cannot enter Mount Athos. Furthermore, an extensive diaconia, to wit, social care for the needy, is carried out. In most Orthodox dioceses, the weak and the poor, the homeless, are supported by the so-called desks for the poor and parish centers of charity. There are church homes for the elderly, there are blood donor centers, scholarship programs for studies, and so on. In many parishes, a free meal is offered on a daily basis to approximately 50 to 100 poor or homeless people. And when the well-known financial crisis of the last decade in Greece raged and hit many, the Archdiocese of Athens served 10,000 free meals a day. In addition, sick, elderly people and prisoners are visited. However, the extent and the character of this charity work differs. In some dioceses, a lot happens for those who need help, and usually without advertisement, whereas in others there is only little to be proud of in this respect. An important reason why in several places collective diaconal action is hardly developed is the widespread conviction that the Church should exclusively concentrate upon liturgy, a life of prayer, and the salvation of individual souls. But in other dioceses, there's emphasis that liturgy and diaconia essentially belong together, and that worship without diaconal outreach risks becoming just a noisy gang, a noisy gong, or a clanging cymbal. A great many diaconal programs were set up by the late Archbishop Christodoulos, who was in office from 1998 until his premature death because of cancer in 2008, and by his staff. The now officiating Archbishop of Athens, we mentioned him, Hieronymus, he also advocates for the diaconal tasks of his church. Notably, it is mainly women who carry out in practice these diaconal programs. We will now focus on the close bonds between the Orthodox Church and the Greek state, which are determined and safeguarded by the Constitution. Just as all the previous constitutions in independent Greece, also the currently prevailing constitution was drafted, I quote, "in the name of the Holy, Consubstantial, and Indivisible Trinity," end quote. in the preamble. And the Constitution states in Article 3 that the dominant religion, in Greek, epikratousa thriskia, is that of the Eastern Orthodox Church of Christ. The constitutional close links between Orthodoxy and the Greek state are manifest in many ways. Let me name a bunch of them. Religious and national festivals often coincide. Processions and parades may be joined. On the feast of the Annunciation of March 25th, the Annunciation of the Archangel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary, also the uprising of 1821 against Ottoman domination is commemorated, a rebellion that, as I indicated, eventually led to the birth of an independent Greek state. Then, on October 28th, which is the day of the Greek no, όχι, to the Italian ultimatum in 1940, which brought Greece into the Second World War. Also, the festival of Mary's protecting veil, scapi, is celebrated. Now, traditionally, the Orthodox Church celebrates this festival on October 1st, the worldwide Orthodox Church. But in Greece, the date was changed so that it could coincide with the day of no. Then, on August 15th, both the Domitian, which here in Austria and other Western countries is called Assumption, of the Mother of God, and Mary's patronage of the Greek military forces are celebrated. Furthermore, the Greek president, Greek ministers, members of parliament are sworn in, I quote, in the name of the Holy Trinity, end quote, on the assumption of their duties. But they now may take a different oath if they wish so. This was done by the former Syriza Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, but the current one of the Nea Demokratia, Konstantinos Mitsotakis, has returned to the religious oath. Alongside this, at the beginning of the new parliamentary year, the Archbishop of Athens and members of the Holy Synod preside in the blessing rite of the Lesser Water Sanctification in Parliament. That is a service that consists of hymns, of prayers, scripture readings, and a blessing with holy water. An additional example of the close bonds between church and state in Greece is that an Orthodox bishop can only accede to office after he has been presented to the Greek president. And also the Ministry of National Education and Religious Affairs, watch its title, not just Education Ministry, but Ministry of National Education and Religious Affairs, has close links with the Orthodox hierarchy. Strikingly, according to the Constitution, Article 3 again, it is not allowed to officially translate the Bible into modern Greek without permission of the Orthodox Church. Last but not least, the Greek civil authorities pay the salaries of the Orthodox clergy. But, throughout history, Greek governments have confiscated a great deal of church property. So paying the clergy's salaries now can also be considered as a kind of payback. The clergy pays also taxes, just as all other Greek citizens are supposed to do. When I lived in Greece, tax evasion was a huge problem. In addition, the state finances the Orthodox seminaries and theological institutes. But the costs of construction and maintenance of Orthodox cult places, including the personnel, such as sacristans, are covered by the parishes and the parishioners themselves. But all in all, the Orthodox Church of Greece is much more prosperous than its poor Albanian and Bulgarian Orthodox sister churches. Until recently, in exchange, Hellenic Orthodoxy turned over 1/3 of its income to the Greek state. So, for example, from the money that people gave in an Orthodox church or chapel to buy and light a candle, around 35% was for the government treasury. But this has changed, and now the church is also taxed for income from its property. As is well known, I just said it, from 2000 on, Greece has been coping with a tremendous financial crisis. On the one hand, the Archbishop and the Holy Synod have been saying that the church is most willing to financially contribute. On the other, they underscore that the crisis is not only about money, but also about spiritual attitudes, and that the Greek people should start living again in accordance with sound Orthodox principles of solidarity and temperance, also humane principles, I would say. It is not merely the Orthodox Church, it is also the Jewish community and several Muslim institutions that enjoy financial state support. But this financial regulation applies neither to the other non-Orthodox groups, such as the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, nor to the adherents of the old calendar. By old calendar, I mean the Orthodox faithful who still follow the ancient Julian calendar, created long ago by Julius Caesar. These old calendarists number some tens of thousands, but their exact number is unknown. The Julian calendar now lags 13 days behind the Gregorian, which is a reformed and more accurate calendar introduced in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII, and from then on more and more used in the Western world. In 1924, the Orthodox Church of Greece adopted the Gregorian calendar by order of the Greek state, but some of the faithful rejected this renewal and later formed independent ecclesiastical organizations, such as the true Orthodox Church, and these are the ones who use the Julian calendar. Incidentally, for the calculation of the Easter date, worldwide Orthodoxy holds fast to the Julian time reckoning. This year, Orthodox Easter will fall on May 2nd, so in 2 weeks. The Western churches have celebrated Easter. The Orthodox and many other Eastern churches, for them, Easter is still upcoming. Next Sunday is Palm Sunday. Greek Orthodoxy shows great differences in its membership that ranges from intense devotion of strict believers who often go to church, live prayer lives, and attend to the moral and dogmatic teaching of their church, to being only nominally Orthodox, or being only Orthodox because it is considered the national religion of Greece. This is nothing exceptional, because it is also true for the Roman Catholic Church in states that are traditionally Catholic, such as Italy and Austria, and for Islam in countries which are predominantly Islamic, such as Turkey and Syria. So in Greece, we meet with many devout and faithful Orthodox Christians, and at the same time, with many other baptized Orthodox that have neither a clear ecclesiastical awareness nor a conscious personal relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, the church, sacramental life. But they too celebrate the passage rites of baptism, matrimony, funerals, commemoration services, and several blessing services. Yes, and of course the apotropaic rites, to avert evil, apotropaic rites against the ubiquitous evil eye, tomati, so important in many Mediterranean countries, not only in the Orthodox ones, also in Catholic Italy, Catholic Spain, in Islamic North Africa, in Jewish Israel. Some faithful highly esteem their priests, especially the pastorally and spiritually gifted. whereas some other Greeks feel bitter about the clergy and complain of scandals and traditionalistic and right-wing attitudes within the church. Moreover, many young people and intellectuals feel more attracted to Western lifestyles than to their own Orthodox Church, which they consider conservative, petrified, outdated. They expect much more from what they call a modern, a Western, a cosmopolitan look on life. The vast majority of Orthodox Church professionals, I mean in particular bishops, priests, deacons, theologians, monks, nuns, view the link between the Orthodox Church, the Greek people all over the world, and Greekness as such, Greekness, Hellenismos, Romeosini, as nearly indissoluble. They like to point out that the New Testament has been written in Greek. It was the world language in the Eastern Mediterranean, and that also the inspirational church fathers and the 7 ecumenical councils of the Christian church employed the Greek language. According to most Greek ecclesiastical authorities, it is Orthodoxy that has preserved the Greek people's identity under Ottoman rule, and it is the church that has played a decisive role in the uprisings against the Turks, and also in the present modernistic and universalistic period, a period characterized by, I quote, secularism, liberalism, consumerism, moral decline. It is Orthodoxy that must sustain the eternal values of the Greek nation and people. It often looks as if people, Greekness, and Orthodoxy are 3 hypostases, 3 forms of one and the same being. That the true Greek is Orthodoxy, is Orthodox, and conversely, the true Orthodox is Greek. Not Russian, not Serb, but Greek. It is important to note, however, that for centuries the concept of Greekness was a much broader idea, which also included also other Orthodox who belonged to the Patriarchate of Constantinople, such as the Bulgarians and the Serbs. So Greekness was more a religious than an ethnic concept. It is mainly due to increasing nationalism, the emphasis on nation states in Europe, think of the 18th and 19th centuries, and the tension with the Bulgarian Exarchate, especially since 1870. The Bulgarian Exarchate is an institution founded to safeguard the rights of the Bulgarian Orthodox within the Patriarchate of Constantinople, but more or less independent, and so a kind of threat for the Greeks. It's because of these phenomena that Greekness has evolved into an ethnic issue. To a great extent, as you well know, the multinational composition of the Balkan population has been lost. Ethnic cleansing and other phenomena. Thessalonica, for instance, for centuries was a multinational and multicultural city, consisting of Jews, the largest segment of the city, consisting of Jews, Turks, Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, and the so-called Franks. Franks are what we would now call Western Europeans. But then it became an almost exclusively Greek city. Moreover, as for present-day Greece itself and the alleged symphony between church and state, there has often been tension, strain between the ecclesiastical hierarchy and those in parliamentary and government circles. Let me mention here only 3 examples: the sharp conflicts on the introduction of compulsory civic matrimony, When I lived in Greece, it was not possible. A separate civic matrimony was not possible. There was only matrimony in church. But now there are both forms. Cremation, and the government decision that according to European Union legislation, religion should no longer be mentioned on the new identification cards, ID cards. On the other hand, it is of note that several theologians, priests, and bishops keep pointing out that Orthodoxy is a matter of the heart, that it is about the spiritual way of purification, abstinence, asceticism, illumination, unity with God, and not about fighting and passions for transitory national, ethnic issues. We will now turn our attention to non-Orthodox denominations and religions, which are, from a quantitative perspective, only small minority groups. The largest one of them is the Muslims in Western Thrace, so in northeastern Greece, close to the Turkish land border, who probably make up about 1 to 2% of the population. The Greek Muslims are ethnically and linguistically most diverse. About 50% of them are Turks. About 35 are Pomaks, who speak Bulgarian, and about 15% are Roma. For decades, this minority's position has been economically rather depressed, isolated, lagging behind as to education. But since the end of the 1990s, the Greek government has made a substantial effort to improve the infrastructure in Western Thrace: economic development, education, roads. The open border between Bulgaria and Greece, now both of them being members of the European Union, contributes also to less isolation of the Greek Islamic minority, since contacts with the substantial Bulgarian Islamic minority are now much easier. However, in everyday life in this region, equal rights and treatment regarding the Islamic minority are still not fully realized. A lot for the better has happened. There is still something to do. Actually, for a long time, the Greek Muslims have to some extent been hostages in a certain sense, because of the Greek-Turkish tensions and because the Greek state related its own treatment of the Muslims mostly to the treatment of the Greek minority and of the Patriarchate of Constantinople by the Turkish state. There are differences, though. It is important to know that extreme violence, such as the Turkish raids, the arson, so the setting in fire of Orthodox churches, and the expulsion of numerous Greeks from Istanbul in 1955, 63, 64, and 1974, have not occurred in Greek Western Thrace. I do hope, though, that changes in Greek society, further improvement of the very difficult relations between Greece and Turkey, as well as a decrease of tension concerning the Cyprus issue, will contribute to further amelioration of the situation of the Muslims in Western Thrace. Greek Islam has often to justify itself vis-à-vis others, strict Muslims and non-Muslims from the Western world alike. On the one hand, the strict Saudi Arabian form of Islam, Wahhabism, which nowadays has become influential in Bosnia, Albania, and Kosovo, has also been attempting to gain a foothold in Greece and Bulgaria, although it has hardly been present there. Wahhabism causes tension with traditional Islam in the Balkans. It rejects its European character. and suspects it, European Islam, of an allegedly non-Islamic orientation. Strict Islamic groups also criticize the flexible way in which the Greek and Bulgarian Muslim communities deal with traditional Islamic regulations concerning drinking and food. Many men and women, for instance, drinking alcohol. On the other hand, many Westerners suspect all Muslims of taking sides with aggressive Islamism and terrorism. So in their eyes, Greek Islam has to prove that it is peaceful and not violent. Regarding family law, marriage, divorce, heritage issues, the muftis, who are appointed by the Greek government, apply Sharia. But this is often disadvantageous for women. Muslims who do not agree with Sharia may appeal to Greek courts that rule by secular law, but this is a much more complicated procedure. A comparison between the fairly peaceful Christian-Muslim relations in Greece and Bulgaria on the one hand, and the former bloody conflicts and atrocities in Bosnia, Kosovo, and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia on the other, makes clear that interreligious and inter-ethnic tolerance in the Balkans cannot be taken for granted. The Greek and Bulgarian model is precious, also because it shows that Balkan Islam essentially belongs to Europe, essentially belongs to the European identity. Nevertheless, one should probably use common sense and soberly remark that also in Greece, interfaith tolerance rather has a negative, a passive character than an affirmative, a positive, an active. The heads of the religious communities and most faithful pragmatically coexist, and at the same time painstakingly take care to keep the differences, and they continuously warn of blending. Just as in many other European countries, also in Greece, the relations between the Islamic community and the rest of the population remain delicate and ambivalent. In addition, that is not all about Islam in Greece, because among the over 1 million foreign immigrants in Greece, both so-called regular and irregular ones, there are several hundreds of thousands of Muslims, mainly from Albania, the Middle East, Eastern Africa, Southeastern Asia. The lack of official mosques and imams is a pressing issue for them. Especially in Athens, this lack sparks tension, even riots. In the big cities, there are many unofficial mosques and prayer rooms without required permits. Right now, the Greek government finally seems to speed up the construction of a large official mosque in the capital. Since 2008 in Attica, which is the region surrounding Athens, there exists also an Islamic cemetery on a plot of land donated by the Orthodox Church. But owing to bureaucracy, it is hardly or not used. The phenomenon of the numerous Muslim and other immigrants clearly demonstrates that Greece, which has been an emigration country, so with E, not I, an emigration country for many decades, has now become an immigration country. Just as the Eastern Roman and the Ottoman empires, also modern Greece finds hospitality and a warm welcome to stranger essentials. But I think most of us know it. During the last years, the massive increase of irregular, so-called illegal immigration has grown into a huge challenge and problem for Greece. Compared to other member states of the European Union, including Italy and Spain, Greece had to cope with a very high influx. The society attempts to deal with this phenomenon which a lot of Greeks find difficult to accept. But Archbishop Christodoulos repeatedly referred to the gospel, saying that Jesus Christ was born in a manger, not in an hotel or a hospital, but in a manger as a stranger. He appealed also to the biblical charity commandment, and he emphasized the church's task to look after the newly arrived foreigners. Several Orthodox parishes and other institutions provide help, such as food, sleeping places, counseling. But unfortunately, in many places, especially at the land and the sea borders, the Greek authorities can hardly cope with this huge challenge. And abroad, especially in Western Europe, also in Austria, the take-in and reception of these immigrants is severely criticized. Let us now look at Judaism. Greek Jewry comprises nowadays only few people, very few people. During the Shoah, the flourishing Jewish communities were exterminated. The Jewish population of Thessalonica, that numbered approximately 50,000 people, was deported in 1943, and nearly all of them were murdered in the German Nazi concentration camps. In addition, the large Jewish cemetery of the Greek co-capital, Thessalonica, was destroyed. And after the war, large new buildings of the Aristotle University were constructed on it. Just like in several other European countries, both the Nazis and many local people robbed Jewish property, especially in rich Thessalonica. However, in some places, Athens and the Ionian island of Zakynthos, for example, parts of the Jewish communities could be saved, owing to the initiatives of Orthodox bishops, local Orthodox bishops, and other protagonists, brave protagonists. Self-evidently, the official freedom of religious activity applies nowadays also to the Jews. Nevertheless, many Greeks have very ambivalent feelings about Jewry and Judaism, and various forms of anti-Semitism are pretty much widespread. In my opinion, besides historical economic factors, another important cause of Greek anti-Semitism is a drastic interpretation of the Christian substitution theology. The Christian substitution theology means in this case that Christianity has allegedly replaced recalcitrant Judaism, and connected with it the age-old anti-Jewish statements and occasional invective and torrents of abuse during the Orthodox liturgical services of Holy Week. Holy Week, the week before Easter. Just one quote. I could quote dozens and dozens. The wicked Jews murdered Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Greek anti-Semitism is mostly latent, but sometimes aggressively comes out into the open. It deserves mention in this framework that it is easy to buy the Greek translation of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, which in Greek translation is usually edited without critical comments. And in several ecclesiastical bookshops, the Greek translation of the Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion is for sale. Now, the Protocols of the Wise of Zion is a successful and fatal 19th century forgery made by order of the Russian state police, secret police, which claims that the Jews will not rest before they have gained world dominion. Many Greeks are convinced that this is an authentic Jewish document. Unfortunately, also due to deficient respective education, many a Greek youngster knows next to nothing about the Shoah. Returning to Christianity, we find in Greece also a Roman Catholic community. This community encompasses firstly ethnic Greeks, who number about 50,000, including some 2,000 who adhere not to the regular Roman rite, but to the Byzantine rite, which is the tradition of the Orthodox Church. And secondly, this community encompasses numerous faithful who have a different nationality. Fact is that among the high number of foreign immigrants, we mentioned already the high number of Muslims among them, but there are also many Catholics among them, numbering at least 200,000. 200,000. This is not a small portion. This phenomenon means that just as during the medieval Genoese and Venetian periods, the Roman Catholic Church in Greece has again largely become a foreigners' church. So the ethnic Catholic Greeks are a minority in their own church. When Pope John Paul II long ago visited Greece, I was there as a journalist for a Dutch newspaper, and the official visit took, amongst other place, in the Olympic basketball stadium in Athens. There were, of course, the ethnic Roman Catholic Greeks with their flags, their blue-white flags. I think they were baffled looking around all these other Roman Catholics waving Philippine flags, Polish flags, and many other flags, and the Greek flags were just a small minority in this huge basketball stadium. Now, yeah, huge basketball stadium for some 4,000 or 5,000 people, yes. Most of these foreign Catholics are, I said it, Poles, Filipinos, Chaldeans who have fled from Iraq, Ukrainians, Western Europeans, and Africans. Many of them work for international firms in fields, households, Philippine women, for instance, who are very active in Greek households, in embassies, whereas many others have an irregular status. Of course, what I now say about Roman Catholics in Greece also goes for Protestants in Greece and for Orthodox Christians of foreign extraction, for Russians, for instance, Armenians. In addition, there are the Jehovah's Witnesses, who number at least 45,000. They are not foreigners, as their opponents often assert, but they are ethnic Greeks. Admittedly, their existence in Greece is due to Western, mainly US-American mission campaigns. The Jehovah's Witnesses have often been attacked, are often attacked in Orthodox writings, anti-heretical courses, as they are called, anti-heretical courses. Although the official State Council of State, to Συμβούλιο της Επικρατείας, the Council of State, has officially recognized them as a constitutional known religion in 1975 and has often confirmed this judgment in later years, many lower civilian authorities and Orthodox Church leaders are convinced that the Witnesses are the most dangerous heresy in Greece. The Witnesses reject the Christological and Trinitarian dogmas. They reject the veneration of icons and many other key elements of the Orthodox tradition. Their mission activities and militancy that are much stronger than that of the most other religious minorities in Greece are perceived by many non-Witnesses as very aggressive and have called forth intense confrontations with the Orthodox dominant religion. A significant improvement has been the introduction of alternate civilian service for conscientious objectors in 1998. During the preceding decades, thousands of young male Jehovah's Witnesses have spent several years in prison, because of their refusal of mandatory military service. My neighbor, for instance, in Thessalonica, they were Jehovah's Witnesses. Their eldest son spent years in prison. First a couple of years, he came out and he was released. Then they called him again for military service. He refused. He was put in prison again. After 2 years, he came out. They called him again for military service. He refused. They put him in prison again. I know of Jehovah's Witnesses who have male Jehovah's Witnesses who have spent 20 years of their lives in prison because of this. And it should be noted that current alternative civilian service, which now exists for conscientious objectors, lasts longer than military service. However, the Greek public opinion often charges conscientious objectors with cowardice, cowards, lack of patriotism. They don't love their country. Approximately 25,000 Greeks are Protestants. There are also several tens of thousands Western Europeans and North American Protestants. It's very difficult for Greeks to clearly distinguish between different churches or branches of Protestantism. In consequence, they tend to put Lutherans, Reformed, Anglicans, Methodists, Baptists, all in one. But how many Austrians can tell the difference between Copts, Armenians, Syrian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox? Besides Protestants, there are also other small Western Christian denominations in Greece, such as the Pentecostals, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, whom you could call Protestants as well, but there's a great pluriformity of Protestants. On the one hand, a number of Orthodox Greeks look with great suspicion at Catholicism, especially the Byzantine Rite Uniate Catholics, with suspicion at Protestantism, the Pentecostal movement, and what I said, the Jehovah's Witnesses. On the other, more and more Greeks, in particular intellectuals, but also a taxi driver in Athens told me the same thing. They contend that despite various differences, Orthodoxy and other Christian churches share the same faith, and that removal of the historical disputes is an urgent matter. It is also relevant to know that because the Catholic Church regards a common Easter date as a major sign of a rapprochement, to get in together, in Greece and in various other countries, the Catholic Church celebrates Holy Week, Easter, Ascension, and Pentecost on the same dates as the Orthodox Church. That means that in Austria, the Catholics and other Austrians have celebrated Easter. But in Greece, the Catholic Church is still to celebrate Easter because they do so together with the Orthodox in 2 weeks. An important historical reason for the traditional rejection of the Western churches are first their history of mission in the Balkans. And yes, during the second millennium, many Western missionaries and evangelizing organizations have come to the Greek territories to attract converts. And in addition, several acts of extreme violence, the sack of Constantinople in 1204 in particular, as well as the superiority claim of the Latin Church and its efforts to submit Greek Orthodoxy to papal Roman authority, nurtured Greek Orthodox suspicion of Catholicism. For a better understanding of the Orthodox resistance to foreign elements, it must also be pointed out that during the 1980s, so after the fall of the Iron Curtain, during the 1980s, when Greece had become a member of the European Union, and in all of Eastern Europe after the fall of the Iron Curtain, again a number of Western missionaries and evangelistic organizations came to Greece and the other countries to harvest and attract converts. And of course, as I just pointed out, the close bond between the Greek state and the Greek Orthodox Church if you share that conviction, it's very difficult to allow for others to stand, other religious communities, to stand on the same level with you. The picture of the Greek religious landscape would be incomplete without reference to a variety of other groups. First, several thousand Greeks, very interesting phenomenon, several thousand Greeks have been baptized in the Orthodox Church, yes, but now they have embraced the religion of classical Greece, and they now worship the 12 Olympian gods and goddesses. So they worship Venus and Jupiter, of course, in Greek, Aphrodite and Zeus, Zeus, Dionysos, and so on. They aim at a pure Hellenism without any Christian or Jewish influences. And many of them believe that the Greek race and blood are superior to all other nations. Members of this movement have been associated with the attacks on Jewish places of worship at the beginning of the third millennium. There are also Buddhists and Baha'i, as well as Scientologists, to name but these. A special case is Freemasonry, which is regarded as a heretical religion of its own by the Orthodox Church. So Freemasonry and Orthodoxy are considered incompatible by the Orthodox leadership. Moreover, there is an unknown and fluctuating number of people who are interested in religion, in spirituality, mysticism, but not in traditional Christian churches or other established religions. They practice theosophy, anthroposophy, esotericism, transcendental meditation, and so on. And others are involved in spiritism and paranormal phenomena. And, important, it's obvious there are also Greeks to whom religion and spirituality are meaningless issues. Just as in other European societies, rapid processes of de-churching, de-traditionalization, individualization take also place in Greece, with a great many people eschewing involvement with institutional religion. For an increasing number of Greeks, traditional established Christianity is no longer attractive, and they feel no need of pastoral words uttered by church leaders. When peeking at Orthodoxy in Eastern and Southeastern Europe, it becomes plain that a great many youngsters and intellectuals in Greece, just as in Serbia and Bulgaria and Romania, consider Western music, prosperity, and a modern cosmopolitan attitude to life more attractive and important, I mentioned it, than their own Orthodox Church, which they deem to be stuck on historical, meanwhile for them irrelevant traditions, and on its own Greek nation. For many of these critics, the Orthodox liturgical and spiritual legacy is no longer tied up with their own lives and has largely served its turn. This, however, does not mean that the majority of Greeks, for instance, no longer feel heirs of the Byzantine culture and no longer regard icons and ancient chapels, for instance, as sacred objects of their culture that they too should respect. Nonetheless, as a result of encompassing change throughout Europe, the Orthodox Church in Greece is losing its monopoly in the market of religious rituals. In the worship mall, it is in the process of becoming merely one of the providers, having to cope with a lot of competition. A growing number of Greeks may still believing in God, the divine, or think that there must be something, but without adhering to any denomination. Experiencing transcendence and mysticism, the encounter with the divine outside the traditional denominations and their worship services. Either believing without belonging, or being not religious but spiritual. So multiculti, as they say here in Austria, and multi-reli are growing. People living fluid lives, devoid of pre-existent boundaries, while searching for new forms of giving meaning to their existence, and eclectically making a personal bricolage that consists of their own highly individual religious attitudes and philosophies of life. Failing to believe in a personal God, in the hereafter, and the power of prayer, they prefer instead a holistic notion of the divine, with their deity being immanent, an energy, a force that assembles and interconnects all living beings. By contrast, others, encountering this tendency and searching for fixed verities, it cannot be that everything is relative, that everything is fluid. We need certainties. So, encountering this tendency and searching for fixed verities, these others resort to world-hostile fundamentalism and traditionalism, which is not, of course, the way of the golden means of most believers in Greece. But there are, of course, also these traditionalistic groups. A provisional probe into interreligious relations, we have made now a survey of most religious groups in Greece, but how are their contacts between themselves, among each other's interreligious relations? Let's try to survey this issue. To start out with, non-Orthodox pupils do not have to attend the Orthodox religion classes at school if they declare that they do not wish so. Several minorities, such as Muslims, Roman Catholics, and Jews, possess also schools of their own. Generally speaking, the non-Orthodox groups are free to publish their own writings, also in other languages. According to the Constitution, freedom of religious conscience is inviolable. Inviolable. Individual and political rights do not depend upon religion. Every officially recognized known religion, known religion, is free, and its cult is protected by law, Article 13 of the Constitution. Greece has also signed international treaties, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations and the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, which, among other things, guarantee freedom of religion. Nevertheless, in practice, most non-Orthodox religious groups complain about some form of discrimination. They usually do so among themselves, not overtly or publicly. At any rate, many adherents of these other denominations feel that the strong position of the Orthodox Greece as the dominant religion and the frequent identification of being Greek with being Orthodox, and following from this the identification of not being Orthodox with not being Greek, hardly leave any room for them. Many of them experience that they are often regarded as strangers, notably when their rights are at stake, not so often when their duties are involved. For a very long time, a career in the army, the diplomatic service, or the police corps was impossible for the non-Orthodox. Currently, however, owing to the judgments by the European Court of Human Rights, a more liberal policy of the Greek government, and the work done by the Office of the Greek Ombudsman, there are far less violations of religious freedom than before. Yet, ecumenical, inter-ecclesiastical, and interfaith relations are still far from being well developed in Greece. On the one hand, there are tolerance, hospitality, occasional encounters between the leaders of the different denominations, as well as a certain degree of ecumenical and interreligious cooperation, but on the other, denominational fundamentalism and lack of knowledge of other confessions and religions are still widespread. However, in my opinion, the Greek interfaith performance record is not worse than that in most other countries of this world. Where are interfaith encounters and dialogues really well developed and satisfying for all parties involved? Are questions such as how much otherness can a nation accept, and are heterogeneous elements a threat or an enrichment? Are these questions not relevant for all countries? In nearly all states, the fact that diverse religious, ethnic, and cultural groups are heterogeneous and different from others is a tremendous social and political challenge. It is indeed a challenge to see reality through the glasses of other religious and non-religious movements and deal creatively with the tension between the cultural, social, and theological differences on the one hand and the basic unity of all humankind on the other. I myself am a Dutch national, also in the Netherlands, a country traditionally known to many people abroad as liberal and tolerant. Presently, there is rapidly increasing tension between openness to foreign cultures and primarily preserving the own Dutch identity. More and more Dutch feel threatened, and the last elections for parliament confirmed this, by the influx of alien elements, especially Muslims, and they demand that the latter's immigration and integration be strictly regulated. The greater part of the Orthodox hierarchy, and also many politicians and other Greeks, regard Orthodoxy as the guardian of morals and national values that must be protected from religious pluralism, from foreign sects, and Turkish and Arabic Islam. Religious multiformity and multiculturalism are new concepts and phenomena to which they are not accustomed, and hence religious multiformity and multiculturalism remain undesirable for most of them. Moreover, they resist westernization, and they fear being absorbed in the huge European Union and consequent loss of identity. Instead, they like to point out that their people are homogeneous and pure, both nationally and religiously. They denounce also often the syncretistic universality, which according to them does not make any distinction between orthodoxy and heresy. On account of the close bonds between orthodoxy and the Greek nation, the Orthodox element sanctifies to a certain extent the national element, the national element making the Orthodox element ethnic. Several prominent Orthodox theologians complain, however, that Orthodoxy suffers from the distortions of nationalism. Yet the close link between Orthodoxy and the Greek culture may also be regarded as an interesting result of the enculturation of Christianity. It has produced many popular religious rituals, especially life rituals like baptism, marriage, and funerals, annual festivals such as Easter and the parish patron saints feast, as well as rituals with respect to the veneration of national or regional saints, such as Saint Demetrios in Thessaloniki. The Orthodox tradition has also influenced beautiful poetry and prose, such as that by Konstantinos Kavafis, Nobel Prize winner Odysseus Elitis, Nikos Kazantzakis, on music, such as Byzantine hymnography and parts of the oeuvre of Mikis Theodorakis. The late Archbishop of Athens, Christodoulos, was a protagonist in the battle to defend Greek religious and ethnic homogeneity against globalization and multicultural relativism. Yet, as I earlier said, at the same time, this archbishop and his collaborators also set up substantial programs to support immigrants and poor people. Christodoulos wanted the Orthodox Church to be a or the main actor in Greek society. Unfortunately, in his battle, this charismatic leader also sparked great controversy and polarization within his own church and country. His successor, the said Hieronymus, seems more inclined to accept the fact that Greece is a pluriform and multicultural society. In a certain way, this situation is a return to the former multicultural Balkans, speaking about the Balkans until the 19th century. However this may be, this situation, excuse me, however this may be, the current archbishop has intervened much less in party politics and everyday political debates than his predecessor did. He seems thus to comply with modernity, with its distinct spheres of influence of civic society at large and specific religious institutions, more than his predecessor. Nonetheless, also Hieronymus has militantly intervened regarding religious education in the name of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, unacceptable from a Greek perspective, and as we all know, now called North Macedonia. Various Western European intellectuals, including academic theologians, consider the close link between nation and church as a presumably Orthodox privilege. Indeed, also in other countries with an Orthodox majority, such as Bulgaria, Russia, Serbia, nation and church are closely interlinked. Notwithstanding this, it is not at all an exclusive Orthodox privilege, because also in Eastern European Roman Catholic countries, such as Croatia and Poland, there exist close bonds between church and nation. In this case, between Roman Catholicism on the one hand and being Croats or Poles on the other. In addition, one should point to the ties between church and nation, which for centuries existed in several Western European countries, between the English state and the Anglican Church, for instance, between the Netherlands and the Reformed Church, or between Austria and Spain on the one hand, and the Roman Catholic Church on the other. Despite official separation in Italy, in this country there are still close bonds between the Italian state on the one hand and the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican on the other. In all of these countries, for centuries, people who did not adhere to the official denomination, the Protestants in Austria and Italy, for instance, these people were regarded and treated as second-class citizens. As for present-day Greece, better education, the long-standing experiences of Greek foreign workers in Western Europe, in North America and Australia, the extensive use of internet and international electronic exchange, mass tourism, and other international traveling, Greek membership of the European Union and other international organizations, European legislation, and several far-reaching sentences by the European Court of Human Rights. All of these factors that I now enumerate, they bring about changes in many a Greek's thought on religious majority and minority groups, on the own identity and otherness. In our present global world, this process speeds up. Although there are various anti-globalist reactions which emphasize the Greek-specific confessional and national identity, It is to be expected that the process that I'm sketching will continue. I wind up. Religious freedom is most important, a very costly good. Openness, respect of other religious and non-religious convictions, and ecumenical and interfaith formation are indispensable in a multi-religious and multicultural society. Own identity and otherness belong together. Only in a dialectical relationship both can spiritually grow. Thank you for your attention.